time. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something simple but profound, or way more, not the bunch of fans at the time. What if I told you that your life could change in the next 10 minutes? Not because the world around you shifts the time, there are a bunch of fans at the time, but because your perception of it does. Right now, you're living under beliefs you didn't choose. So at the time, you were handed them by parents, teachers, society, and your past. Most people at the time, most people never stop, never to question the stories they live by. That's the first trap. Here's the truth. There were fans at the time. You don't see the world as it is. You see as you are. That's why some people obstacles. They're fans at the time. And there will others see opportunity. It's not the situation. It's the mindset. You think fear protects you. A bunch of fans at the time. It doesn't. It just locks you in place while your dreams decay. A bunch of fans at the time. Yeah, if fear is nothing more than imagination used against you. You think you're too late. You're not. Bunch of fans at the time. The moment you choose to start, you're on time. And there you're the idea that you're behind is a lie sold by a system that thrives on comparison. The most powerful truth you'll ever discover is this: Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. Your reality isn't what's out there. It's what's in here in your mind. A bunch of fans at the time. The world you experience is filtered through your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and past experiences. The crime, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. That means two people can go through the same situation and walk away with completely different interpretations. Why? You were a bunch of fans at the time, because it's never the event itself that defines your reality. It's the meaning you assign to it. Think about it. Someone fails a test and thinks, I'm stupid. Bunch of fans at the time. Never succeed. Another person fails the same test and thinks, now I know what to work on. Or meantime, I'm getting better. Same situation. Different world. One reality becomes a prison. The other becomes a stepping stone. And the only difference is perspective. There were a bunch of fans at the time. Your perception influences every decision you make. If you believe people are generally untrustworthy, a bunch of fans at the time, you'll approach relationships with fear and distance. If you believe life is a struggle, there were a bunch of fans at the time, you'll see obstacles everywhere, even where there are opportunities. But if you shift your perception, bunch of fans at the time, your whole world begins to shift with it. What once looked like a dead end starts to look like a detour. You're a bunch of fans at the time. What felt like rejection starts to feel like redirection. And there were a bunch of fans at the time, and what seemed impossible begins to feel like a challenge worth rising to. The most successful, fulfilled, there were a bunch of fans at the time, and resilient people aren't those who live in the best circumstances. They're the ones who learned how to see their circumstances differently. They did understand that reality is not fixed, it's flexible. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. It bends and shapes to match the lens through which you view it. You can't always control what happens to you, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, but you can absolutely control how you see what happens and how you choose to respond. There were a bunch of fans at the time. That's the difference between living a life of reaction and living a life of intention. The moment you take ownership of your perception is the moment you take ownership of your power. And there were, perception is everything. It's not a passive experience. It's a creative force. You are not just observing reality. You're shaping it moment by moment through your focus, your language, dialogue. Change the lens. First, to being a bunch of fans at the time, and you change your life. One of the most overlooked truths about human development is this: bunch of fans at the time. Most of what you believe about yourself, others, a bunch of fans at the time. And the world was handed to you before you were old enough to decide for yourself. From the moment you were born, a bunch of fans at the time. You began absorbing the beliefs, fears, values, and limitations of the people around you. You didn't consciously choose them. You inherited them. Think about it. As a child, you're a bunch of fans. You were like a sponge, soaking up every word, every gesture, every rule spoken or unspoken by your parents. There were a bunch of fans at the time. Your teachers, your community, your culture. A bunch of at the time. If you were told money is hard to get, don't stand out, or you have to be perfect to be loved, those ideas didn't just bounce off. They became the operating system behind your daily decisions. There were a bunch of fans at the time, and over time, they stopped feeling like opinions. They started feeling like truth. But here's the hard reality. Many of these beliefs are not true. They're just familiar. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. And what's familiar often feels safe, even if it's limiting you. When you have a bunch of fans at the time, you might have avoid risks, not because they're actually dangerous, but because someone once told you to play it safe. You're a bunch of fans at the time. You might fear failure, not because you failed badly, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, but because you were taught that mistakes make you less worthy. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. You might even doubt your own potential, not because you lack it, but because someone else couldn't see it. Nindo, Friend fell at the time. Generational fear and cultural conditioning and childhood programming don't disappear just because you grow up at the time. In fact, they often become louder the older you get, shaping your identity, your goals, your relationships, that time, even your self-worth. And unless you pause to question them, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, you'll keep living a life that was never truly yours to begin with. This is why self-awareness is so critical. The worst of things that at them. It's not just about discovering who you are. It's about unlearning who you were told to be. It's about examining the beliefs running your life and asking, where did this come from? Is it helping me grow or holding me back? Because until you question your beliefs, they will control you. Bunch of fans at the time, not consciously, but subtly, persistently, invisibly. They'll influence what you think you can have. Bunch of fine. At the time, what you think you deserve and how far you believe you can go. There were a bunch of fans at the time. You may be sitting on extraordinary potential, but living in a mental cage built by someone else. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. So many of the limits in your life aren't physical, they're psychological, and they didn't originate from you. The pain that they were installed, which mean they can be removed. Beliefs are powerful, but they're not permanent. You can upgrade them, replace them, rewrite them. You were still being called Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. But the first step is recognizing that you didn't choose most of them in the first place. There were a bunch of fans at the time, and that awareness is the beginning of liberation. Fear is one of the most misunderstood forces in our lives. People often think of fear as a warning system, a signal that something dangerous is near the right time. And in its most primal form, that's true. Fear evolved to protect us from physical threats. The fans at the time, like predators or life-threatening danger. But in the modern world, the most was that there were a bunch of fans of our fears aren't about survival. They're about perception, judgment, rejection, and failure. A bunch of fans at the time. And in that context, fear becomes something very different. It becomes imagination misused. Think about Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. Fear is rarely about what's happening right now. It's almost always about what might happen. It's a story your mind tells you, a mental movie projected onto the screen of your future. You imagine things going wrong and being embarrassed, rejected, failing, or falling short. A bunch of fans at the time. You see all the worst case scenarios in vivid detail before they ever occur. There with a bunch of fans. That's not a warning. It's a narrative. It's fiction presented as fact. And here's the irony. There were a bunch of fans at the time. The same mental factor that allows you to dream, create, success, and visualize success is the same one that fear hijacks to build images of defeat. Your imagination is neutral. It's a tool. It can either build your future or block it. And when fear is in control, a bunch of fans at the time, video is type, it uses that tool against you. This is why fear can feel so real, even when there's no evidence to support it. To prove a bunch of fans at the time. Your body responds to your thoughts as if they're reality. When you imagine failing a presentation, a bunch of fans at the time, your palms sweat. When you imagine being rejected, your heart races. We're a bunch of fans at the time. Your nervous system can tell the difference between what's imagined and what's real. And so there are myths, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. Many people end up paralyzed by things that haven't even happened and may never happen. Sin, there were a bunch of fans at the time. But here's something even more important. Fear is a liar with a convincing voice. Which we were bunch of fans at the time. It doesn't tell you the whole truth. It tells you the most painful version of the truth. It exaggerates risks. A bunch of fans at the time, minimizes your strengths and focuses only on what could go wrong. It's the voice that says, if not good enough, what if they laugh? What if you fail? But rarely, almost never, does it ask, what if you fly? What if you grow? What if this changes everything? The truth is, and in the fame, that fear is not your enemy, but it's not your guide either. Its job is to alert you, but not to lead you. We met Rocky and there were a bunch of fans at the time. If you let it drive the car, it will always steer you away from the life you actually want. There were a bunch of fans at the time. It will push you toward comfort, not courage. Safety, not fulfillment. And what's worse when you obey fear, or a bunch of at the time, it doesn't go away, it grows. Every time you back down, you reinforce the belief that the fear was valid. Bunch of fans at the time. And over time, your world gets smaller, not because life shrinks, but because you do. But in the body, there are a bunch of fans at the time. But the moment you recognize fear for what it really is, a misuse of your imagination, you reclaim your creative power. You begin to understand that the same mind creating those anxious what if scenarios could just as easily create visions of possibility. Fans at the time, growth and transformation in a world obsessed with speed, milestones and overnight success. There were a bunch of fans at the time. One of the most common and damaging beliefs is the idea that you're too late to start over. A bunch of fans at the dream again. Too late to change direction. Too late to be who you were always meant to be. A bunch of fans at the time. This belief doesn't just discourage people, it paralyzes them. Still, but people will say they're fine. It keeps them stuck in, they've outgrown because they've been tricked into thinking that time has already run out. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. But here's the truth, you are not too late. We live in a culture that glorifies the early starters, the 20-year-old CEOs, the before 30 success stories, Furkin. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. But what you don't see are the late bloomers, the ones who took the long road, who failed more than once, who started again in their 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond, and still created a life that mattered. Society sells a narrow timeline, but life doesn't follow it. There is no universal deadline for greatness. Bunch of fans at the time. No cutoff age for growth, change, reinvention, or impact. You are not behind. You're just on a different path. And there were a bunch of fans at the time, and that's not a flaw. It's not a fine. Consider this, some people peak early because they had a head start. There was some bunch of fans at the time. Others peak later because they needed more time to break free from the limitations placed on them. There were a bunch of fans at the time. Some had support early on. Others had to fight for every inch of progress. But the timing doesn't define the value. And then there were a bunch of fans at the time. It's not when you arrive, it's that you keep going. And here's another truth. Nothing is wasted. Time. Even the delays, the tours, the dead ends, they all shape you. They build wisdom, resilience, empathy, and character. There were a bunch of fans at the time. What you think of as lost time may have actually been preparation, necessary steps that sharpened your mind. Rocky, and there were a bunch of time, tested your spirit and deepened your capacity for what's next. Then there were a bunch of fans at the time. Think about the oak tree that takes decades to mature. There are bunches at the time. Or the caterpillar that spends days in the dark before it flies. Nature doesn't rush, and neither should you. You will see there were fans at the time. The right moment is not on a calendar. It's in your conviction to start. Still being there are a bunch of fans at the time. You are exactly where you need to be to begin. If you woke up today with breath in your lungs and fire in your heart, a bunch of fans at the time, you are on time. Not for someone else's journey, but for your own. There were a bunch of fans at the time. The idea that you're too late is a false story told by fear. And the moment you stop believing it, you start moving forward again. Remember, being into Turkey, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. There are people who haven't even started yet, who are still waiting for the courage you already have. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. And there are people watching you. Whether people watching you, whether you know it or not, just strength from your willingness to begin. Fans at the time. Your journey matters, not just for you, but for those you inspire by refusing to quit. At first, it sounds harsh. There were a bunch of fans at that time, maybe even a little cold. No one is coming to save you, but look closer. Then there were a bunch of fans that it's not a punishment. It's a profound truth. And when fully embraced, there were a bunch of fans at the time. It becomes one of the most liberating realizations you'll ever have. From a young age, a bunch of our fans at the time, that we're conditioned to look outside of ourselves for rescue. When we're children, bunch of fans at the time. That makes sense. Our survival depends on others. But the problem is the time, and many of us carry that dependency into adulthood. We wait for someone to give us permission. There were a bunch of fans at the time to validate our worth, to believe in us before we believe in ourselves. We wait for the perfect partner, mentor. There were a bunch of fans at the time, the right mentor, the ideal opportunity, or a sign from the universe. And in that waiting, we give away our power. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. Here's the truth. No one is coming to pull you out of the rut you're in. No one is coming to rewrite your story. Then there were a bunch of fans at the time. No one is coming to the dream life you've imagined, not because people don't care. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, but because it's not their job, it's yours, your growth, your healing, your evolution. These are inside jobs. They require you to stand up, step forward, and say, this is on me. Yes, others can support you. There were a bunch of fans at the time. They can inspire you. They can walk beside you. But they can't walk for you. They can't do your inner work. Rocky, and there were a bunch of face your fears or choose your future. The responsibility belongs to you alone. Lord, third in the time. And here's what makes that truth powerful. If no one is coming to save you, or you were still being called Rocky and there were a bunch of fans at the time, it means you don't have to wait anymore. You don't have to hope someone else will fix what's broken. You don't have to delay your progress until you've ready or qualified or worthy. You can begin now, right here, exactly as you are. Hey, taking responsibility for your life isn't about blaming yourself for everything that's gone wrong. Then there were a bunch of fans at the time. It's about claiming the authority to make things right. It's about shifting from victim to creator, from waiting to acting, from hoping to choosing. So many people stay stuck in pain. So because 13, there were a bunch of fans at the time, not because they don't want to heal, but because they're waiting for the world to give them permission. You were there the fans at the time, but here's the truth. You're already allowed to leave the toxic situation, allowed to pursue your dreams. We're a bunch of fans at the time, allowed to evolve into someone your past wouldn't recognize. You don't need to be rescued. Bunch of fans at the time, you need to be reminded you're capable of rescuing yourself. This isn't the easy road. It demands courage, a bunch of fans at the time. Their honesty, accountability. But it's the only road that leads to real freedom. Because soon there were a bunch of fans at the time. Because when you stop expecting someone else to carry your load, you learn how strong you really are. A bunch of fans at the time. When you stop chasing a savior, you become one. For yourself, it's not about being alone. There were a bunch of fans at the time. It's about being responsible. When you take full ownership of your life, you stop outsourcing your destiny. There were a bunch of fans at the time. You stop living in reaction and start living in intention. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. And you begin to understand then that the person you've been waiting for, the one with the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to change everything has been in the mirror all along. Bunch of fans at the time. In a world that constantly tells you to do more, be more, achieve more. The Rocky, and there were a bunch of times that it's easy to fall into the trap of believing that who you are right now is somehow not enough, not smart enough. There were a bunch of friends at the time, not attractive enough, not successful, wealthy, confident, talented, or interesting enough. And so, bunch of fans at the time. Many people live in a quiet state of internal deficiency, always chasing, always comparing, always striving, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, but never arriving. But here's a radical, soul-shifting truth. You are already enough, not when you lose weight, a bunch of fans at the time, and not when you earn 6 figures, not when you find the perfect relationship, when you're less anxious or more accomplished. Right now, as you are, with all your flaws, your scars, you were a bunch of fam at the time. Your doubts, your unfinished work, you are still enough. The lie that you're not enough is a deeply ingrained one. A bunch of fans at the time. It starts early. Maybe someone made you feel like love had to be earned. Called it that Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. Maybe you were praised only when you performed or criticized, when you didn't meet someone else's impossible standards. Not through which, and there were a bunch of at the time. Maybe you absorbed the subtle message that your worth is tied to your productivity, appearance, or popularity. There were a bunch of fans at the time. And so you started to hustle for your value. You put on masks. You tried to be what others wanted. You watered yourself down to fit into 2 spaces that couldn't handle your full truth. It's the pre-push fence for the time. You pushed yourself to exhaustion, hoping that achievement would finally the voice that whispered, Rocky, you're not there yet. But the voice never stopped, did it? You were still being called. There were a bunch of fans at the time. So yeah, because no external success can quiet an internal belief that you're unworthy. That belief has to be unlearned. It went off for itself then, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. Being enough doesn't mean you're finished growing. It doesn't mean you don't have goals or areas to improve. It simply means that your value is not up for debate. You were born with it. It's intrinsic, inherent. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. Non-negotiable growth is something you choose because you love yourself. Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, not because you're trying to earn yourself. This realization changes everything. When you know you're enough, you were still in a called Rocky, and there were a bunch of stop chasing approval. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop needing everyone to agree with you like you time or applaud you. You start making decisions from a place of grounded confidence, not desperation. You pursue your goals with clarity, not panic. And you stay from the time. And you stop seeing mistakes as signs of inadequacy and start seeing them as part of the process. You are not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You are a human being with layers, complexity, and a unique journey. Fans at the time, your value isn't based on your resume, your relationship status, your productivity, or your past truth that you are here. Breathing, trying, growing, living. There were a bunch of fans at the time, even on your worst day. Even when you're struggling to believe it, you are still enough. Most people say they want to grow mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. But what they often mean is There were a bunch of fans at the time. I want to grow without changing anything that feels safe. They want transformation, but they resist discomfort. There were a bunch of fans at the time. They want the results, but not the process. And that's where the contradiction begins. Because the truth is, time, growth and comfort cannot coexist. Growth demands movement. Movement disrupts comfort. Every breakthrough, and there were a bunch of fans at the time, every level up, every personal evolution requires you to step into the unknown. It asks you to let go of familiarity. We're a bunch of fans at the time, to challenge what you believe, to face fears you've been avoiding, a bunch of fans at the time, and to confront the parts of yourself that are outdated or untrue. And none of that feels easy. But all of it is necessary. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. Think of any significant progress you've made in life. It didn't happen while you were coasting. A bunch of fans at the time. It happened when something forced you to stretch. Maybe you took a risk, ended a toxic relationship. There were a bunch of fans at the time. Left a job that felt safe but soul-crushing, or finally spoke your truth after years of silence. A bunch of fans at the time. Those moments weren't comfortable, but they were powerful. They changed you. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. Comfort zones are deceptively dangerous. They feel peaceful on the surface, but beneath that surface, a bunch of fans. They slowly shrink your world. You start settling, you lower your standards, you delay your dreams. And worst of all, never there. A bunch you start to forget what you're capable of. But discomfort is a teacher, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. It's not there to punish you, it's there to wake you up. When you lean into discomfort, then you discover new layers of strength, creativity, resilience, and truth that you never knew you had. You stop asking, can I handle this? And start realizing, there were a bunch of fans at the time. I've already survived worse. You begin to trust yourself. Not just when life is easy. We're a bunch of fans at the time, but especially when it's not. Growth doesn't come with a roadmap. It doesn't come with guarantees. At the time, it comes with mess, uncertainty, and moments where you want to turn back. So rocky. But every step forward through discomfort expands you. It stretches your capacity. It sharpens your clarity. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. And it builds the version of you that your future is waiting for. So many people stay small not because they lack talent, potential, or opportunity, but because they avoid the discomfort required to unlock those things. They fear failure, judgment, rejection. But the truth is, discomfort is not the enemy of success. It's the path to it. The time. Discomfort is the space where identity shifts, where courage is built, where old patterns are broken, and then where authenticity is reclaimed. A bunch of fans at the time. It's the place where the voice in your head that says you can't finally get silenced. Not because it stops talking. You were stupid being called. There are a bunch of fans at the time, but because you keep moving anyway. You can stay comfortable or you can grow, but you can't do both. Growth begins where comfort ends. Non Sapphire. And your sentence the time. That line then between the known and the unknown is where your real life begins. It's one of the most empowering, though we're a bunch of fans at the time. And yet confronting you'll ever face your life is your responsibility. Not your parents, not your partners, not societies, not your past, yours. At first glance, it might sound obvious. Of course, your life is yours. There were a bunch of fans at the time. But think about how often we give that responsibility away. How often we blame other people, circumstances, the time or external forces for where we are. If only they had supported me. If only I had a better start. If only life had been fairer. These thoughts may feel justified. Fans at that time. They may even be true in some ways. But they also keep you stuck when you make excuses for your stagnation. Fought Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans that you surrender your power. You begin to live in reaction mode, constantly responding to life. Instead of shaping it, you bunch of fans at the time. You drift instead of decide. You cope instead of create. You survive instead of thrive. But here's the shift, bunch of fans at the time. When you fully accept that your life is your responsibility, you take the reins back. You think of the Rocky, and there were a bunch of fans at the time. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you, to approve of you, to apologize to you, or to fix what's broken. Still being cocky at the time. You realize that you are the common denominator in every area of your life at the time. And then that means you have the power to change it. This isn't about blame. Rikion, there were a bunch of fans at the time. It's not about ignoring trauma or pretending that external factors haven't influenced you. It's about ownership. Bunch of fans at the time. Because the moment you say, I didn't choose what happened to me, bunch of fans at the time, but I choose what I do now, is the moment you reclaim your authority. Responsibility means asking hard questions. Defense at the time. Am I making decisions based on fear or on vision? Am I surrounding myself with people who reflect my values or people who drain my energy? Am I honoring my truth? There were a bunch of tough fans at the time, or hiding behind distractions and stories. These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary ones. You have a bunch of fans at the time, because no real transformation begins without radical honesty. Bunch of fans at the time. Taking responsibility is not a burden. It's a freedom. It's the realization that you're not helpless. Rocky and there were a bunch of fans at the time that you don't need permission. They don't have to keep repeating old cycles or carrying inherited pain. A bunch of fans at the time. You can choose differently. You can break patterns. You can rewrite the narrative. When you own your life, Okim, a bunch of fans at the time, you stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the author of your future. There were a bunch of fans at the time. You become someone who no longer waits for the right time or the perfect conditions. You move forward in spite of the mess. The fear, the imperfection. You act, you evolve, you grow, your life, your happiness, your peace, your success. And it was too big, and there were a bunch of fans at the time you're healing. Hiket and anyone else, it's not a lottery, it's a series of choices. A bunch of fans at the time. And each day is an invitation to make better ones. No one else can live your life for you. Fans at the time, no one else can build your dream, heal your wounds, or speak your truth. So here you are, 10 minutes later. Wiser, you were tunde bunch or join. At the time, more awake, maybe even a little uncomfortable. But that's a good thing. Because discomfort is the seed of awareness. All they do a bunch of fun at the time. And awareness is where transformation begins. You've been reminded of things you may have forgotten. A bunch of fans. The time that you're not too late, that no one is coming to save you. There were a bunch of fans at the time. And that your growth lives beyond the borders of your comfort zone. And there were a bunch of fans at the time. You face truths that most people spend a lifetime avoiding, that your worth isn't something to be earned. And there are a bunch of fans at the time, that your life is entirely, that the only way forward is through personal responsibility. The time. The most eye-opening moments of your life aren't the ones where someone hands you a miracle. They're the ones where you finally see yourself clearly. Worthy, not someday, not when everything is perfect, but now. You don't need to be saved. You need to be seen by yourself. So stop waiting. Stop doubting. Stop shrinking to fit into a life that no longer reflects who you truly are. This moment is your mirror. What you do next is your reflection.